Right, we'll get started. Hi, everyone. My name is Dominique Smith, and welcome to the EPA and the Hawaii Department of Health Red Hill in Focus webinar series. Today's webinar is on the Red Hill 2023 consent order between the EPA, the Navy, and the Defense Logistics Agency, or DLA. The consent order requires steps to ensure the safe defueling and closure of the Red Hill bulk fuel storage facility. In December of 2022, EPA shared a proposed order with the public and asked for input on how we could make the proposed order better. We received over 1,700 comments during the public comment period, which was an indication that there was a lot of room for improvement. So what we did is we reviewed every comment that was submitted and made changes to the order to incorporate key recommendations. The final 2023 consent order that was signed on June 2nd, 2023 was made better based on revisions influenced by the public. This webinar will provide an overview of the requirements included in the 2023 consent order and revisions that were made in response to public comment. We'll also have a Q&A session at the end to answer questions from the audience. Next slide. So the Red Hill in Focus webinar series is a series that EPA and the Hawaii Department of Health, or DOH, are hosting to present information to the public on what agencies are doing to address impacts to human health and the environment from the Red Hill bulk fuel storage facility releases. Webinar information is available on the EPA website, and you can access it by following the link at the bottom of the screen. Next slide. Now I want to quickly go over the functions of the platform that we're using during tonight's webinar. If you click the audio settings on the bottom of your screen, you'll be able to select the audio source that you prefer. If you are experiencing audio issues at all during the webinar, please use the dial-in number that was included in your registration email. Additionally, individuals participating can enter questions throughout the webinar in the questions and answer box. You'll see the Q&A icon at the bottom of the screen, so click that and you'll open up the Q&A box. Feel free to submit any questions that you have as they arise during the presentations. A member of our webinar team may respond to your question right there in the chat box, or if you have a more complex question, it will be asked to our panel for a verbal response during the question and answer portion of the call. Just as a reminder, today's webinar is about the 2023 consent order. So if your question is outside of the scope of today's session, a member of our team will follow up with you after the webinar to get your questions answered. Also, we will be posting recordings of this webinar on the EPA Red Hill webpage in English, Tagalog, Ilocano, Japanese, and Olelo, Hawaii. The interpreted recordings will take a couple of weeks to be completed, but we're anticipating that they'll be available in July. If you or others you know require interpretation in another language not listed, please reach out to redhill@epa.gov and we'll provide that for you. Next slide. Here you're seeing our agenda for today. After I'm finished providing the introduction, Amy Miller, the Director of the Enforcement and Compliance Assurance Division, will discuss the details of the 2023 consent order, including how EPA engaged with community partners during this process. We'll also share details about the Community Representation Initiative, and then we'll have time for questions. Now I'll pass it over to Amy.
Thank you, Dominique, and good evening, everyone. So first, I'm going to talk about community engagement on the consent order. So we started this process back in December 19th, 2022, and had a comment period that lasted until February 6, 2022. Within that comment period, we hosted several public meetings, including a town hall on January 19th. In addition, we also had virtual meetings with various stakeholders and community representatives, including the Honolulu Board of Water Supply, Oahu Water Protectors, and the Sierra Club. Next slide. So this consent order has three major components. The first being defueling. So this order covers defueling and makes it a requirement of the order that the Navy and Defense Logistics Agency must defuel the underground storage tanks, the surge tanks, and the pipelines. Based on a defueling plan supplement that was recently submitted to the regulatory agencies, the Joint Task Force will begin defueling by October 2023 and remove almost all of the fuel by January 19th, 2024. EPA is in the process of reviewing that supplement and its schedule. And after EPA approves it, it will be incorporated into the consent order and be enforceable. When the fuel is removed from these tanks, they will be placed in tankers and relocated in approved locations. Next slide. Another portion of this consent order deals with the closure of the tanks. And with this requirement, the Navy and Defense Logistics Agency must comply with Hawaii's regulations for underground storage tank closures. These regulations require the removing of the underground storage tank system or filling the underground storage tank system with inert or solid material, or closing the underground storage tank in a place in a manner approved by the regulatory agencies. EPA has received preliminary documents, and the Navy is in the process of they have completed a survey and are continuing to receive information from individuals on what should be done with the tanks. Ultimately, a closure plan will be submitted to the regulatory agencies, and the agencies will need to review and determine if it meets the requirements of the regulations. Next slide. Also, this consent order addresses drinking water. There are several components of drinking water protection in this order. First, there is an incorporation of a long-term monitoring plan that will ensure that no residual byproducts resulting from the fuel contamination remain in the system. This will be done through sampling and testing of the drinking water system. Also, there are steps that are being taken to improve the infrastructure, the drinking water infrastructure at Joint Base Pearl Harbor, so that the drinking water system is working effectively. In addition, there will be steps taken to put in measures to ensure protection of the groundwater, the source of the drinking water at Joint Base Pearl Harbor. Next slide. So next, I would like to talk a little bit about the revisions that we made to the 2023 consent order to address public comments. There were 5 major revisions. We received many comments concerning the fact that the draft consent order did not have a deadline for defueling. As a result of those comments, we have required that a defueling plan be submitted with a schedule that can be incorporated and enforced through this consent order. Secondly, we heard overwhelmingly a need for more community engagement and public involvement in the decision-making process. In order to achieve this, we have created a community representation initiative, which Dominique will discuss later on in this presentation, which will give individuals from the community an opportunity to engage with the regulated regulators, along with the Navy and Defense Logistics Agency and the Joint Task Force. Next slide. Also, we made it very clear in this consent order that we will specifically seek input from specific local technical experts, including the Honolulu Board of Water Supply. In addition, both the Navy and Defense Logistics Agency and EPA are committed to incorporate perspectives and insights of the cultural significance of the aquifer to Native Hawaiians and Hawaii residents in our decision making. Additionally, when there is a spill, not only will the Navy and Defense Logistics Agency be required to provide public notification, they will be required to put it on their website and also notify those participants in the Community Representation Initiative. Next slide. So some of the comments, some of the major themes in the comments I'm going to be covering now include accountability for the Navy and Defense Logistics Agency. So EPA in issuing this order is following our practices and procedures for issuing an imminent and substantial endangerment order. This order is focused on future work that is going to be done. And we want to protect human health and the environment. This order is not a mechanism to seek penalties for prior releases or criminal violations. There are other enforcement tools that can be used to do those types of actions. But this action, just to be clear, does not preclude EPA from taking penalty actions in the future. The focus of this order is the creation of a detailed roadmap for the work the Navy and the Defense Logistics Agency will complete to safely defuel and close the Red Hill facility and ensure protection of the drinking water supply. In addition, we have an additional order that's already in place to deal with remediation, and that is our 2015 administrative order on consent. With the 2015 order, the Department of Health is also a party, and the focus of this order, which we recently clarified, is to focus on the remediation of and cleanup of Red Hill releases. Next slide. There were many comments concerning the permanent closure of Red Hill, and EPA acknowledges those concerns over the timely closure and the potential reclamation of Red Hill. As I mentioned earlier, the Navy has distributed a survey seeking public input on tank closure and whether and how they could be beneficially reused. So those comments, the survey was open until May 31st, 2023. And the interim results have been recently shared during the June Fuel Tank Advisory Committee meeting. And the final results will be provided to the November Fuel Tank Advisory Committee meeting. Next slide. Another group of comments focused on concerns around the aqueous film forming foam, or AFF, and per and polyfluorinated substances called PFAS. There was a spill in 2022 in November, and there were many concerns about that spill. And EPA acknowledges those concerns about the releases of AFF and PFAS into the environment at Red Hill. EPA is committed to ensuring that the 2022 AFF release is properly investigated, characterized, and remediated. The Navy is addressing PFAS at Red Hill pursuant to both the 2015 Administrative Order on Consent and the Pearl Harbor Federal Facility Agreement. Next slide. In addition to the investigation and remediation, EPA has been in discussions with the Navy, and as part of the consent order, the Navy will be producing a source water protection plan and a phase 1 of that plan, which provides a description of protective measures to be put into place to protect the Red Hill shaft during defueling. In addition, samples have been taken from the groundwater wells as well as the drinking water shafts, and all have shown no exceedances of Hawaii environmental action levels. And in the case of the drinking water samples as well, they did not exceed the environmental action levels. And in fact, there was a non-detect in the current existing drinking water well. If you would like to see copies of the groundwater data, we have an app that we've developed, and this QR code will take you directly to that app. Next slide. We also received many comments and concerns that EPA's 2023 consent order would conflict or undermine the Hawaii Department of Health's emergency order. Hawaii Department of Health was asked to participate in this consent order, but they made the determination that they could best serve Hawaii by proceeding under their own emergency order. We have worked very closely with the Hawaii Department of Health to ensure that we have close coordination as we move forward with defueling and closure and drinking water. The 2023 consent order is structured to support already existing requirements under the Hawaii Department of Health's emergency order. In addition, our 2023 consent order includes requirements, particularly around drinking water that are not in Hawaii Department of Health's emergency order, along with other requirements such as tank tightness testing. The 2023 consent order does not limit in any way Hawaii Department of Health's ability to enforce their emergency order. Next slide. And now I'm going to turn it to Dominique, who will discuss the last set of comments and how we address them on community representation initiative. Dominique?
Thanks, Amy. Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Dominique Smith. I am the Environmental Justice and Community Engagement Coordinator for Red Hill, and I'm really excited to talk about the Community Representation Initiative. This will be a group that reflects the concerns of the affected communities. It will represent the diversity of local interests and function effectively as its own group or organization. We included the Community Representation Initiative in the final order in response to over 100 public comments that stated that Kanaka Maoli, or Native Hawaiians, and Hawaii residents need to have a more significant role in Red Hill actions. It's a tenet of environmental justice and a belief of the EPA that community members that are affected by agency decisions should be meaningfully involved in the decision-making process. So for this reason, the EPA is supporting the development of the Community Representation Initiative to provide the public a seat at the table for more two-way dialogue. On the screen now, you'll see a list of roles and responsibilities that members of the Community Representation Initiative will have. And the first is to attend monthly meetings. The Community Representation Initiative will meet twice a quarter for regular discussions with the Department of Defense and regulators, and will also assist the Navy in preparing for quarterly public updates. So essentially, there'll be monthly meetings, 2 Community Representation Initiative meetings a quarter, and then 1 quarterly public meeting that's also required under the 2023 consent order. During the Community Representation Initiative meetings, members will review Red Hill information, including technical documents, proposed and final plans, status reports, and members will provide input on decisions relating to defueling, closure, and drinking water. And a key responsibility of members of the Community Representation Initiative is to represent the views of the public and bring those perspectives to the larger group, including EPA and Navy. And also, the Community Representation Initiative members will share information gathered during their regular meetings with their network. Next slide, please. So the Navy, the Defense Logistics Agency, Joint Task Force, Red Hill, or JTF, EPA and DOH will work alongside the Community Representation Initiative group to ensure that all parties are engaging with and considering their comments. The group will receive briefings from the Navy, DLA, and JTF on their progress in defueling, closure, and drinking water. Navy and DLA will attend all Community Representation Initiative meetings and will present regular updates and provide presentations on topics requested by the group. They'll also receive comments on key aspects of project's progress. EPA and DOH will participate in Community Representation Initiative meetings, and the notes will be taken at all Community Representation Initiative meetings, and summaries will be posted online so everyone can review what's discussed during those meetings. Next slide. So now that I've given an overview of the initiative, you may be wondering, how do people get on this group? So I want to start by saying this is not EPA's group. It doesn't belong to EPA or Navy or JTF or DLA. The EPA is assisting in standing up this group, and will support it by helping out with the administrative and logistical needs. But in order for the group to be successful in its goal of representing affected communities, the group needs to be community-led, and the members need to be selected by members of the public. So EPA is not selecting members to be in this group. What we're asking for is your participation and your insight in our upcoming scoping meeting. So on July 27th, there will be an opportunity for folks to provide more input on how the EPA can facilitate the formation of this group. We'll be hosting the Community Representation Initiative in-person informational and scoping meeting. And during the scoping meeting, a questionnaire will be shared with participants on how they would like the representation group to be formed. Some examples of questions that will be asked during this meeting are, which groups or communities do you want to be represented in the membership? What are some prerequisites members should have? How many expert, resident, or community leader seats should be included in the 10 seats? Additionally, during this meeting, we'll discuss how the nomination and selection process should be managed. EPA will then analyze the responses provided during the scoping meeting and will facilitate the nomination and selection process based on responses collected during the scoping meeting. So the scoping meeting is a really important step because we at EPA want to collaborate with you to ensure that this group meets your needs and is comprised of people that you want to represent you. Next slide, please. So now we can move on to the questions and answer portion of this webinar. Questions that have been submitted in the Q&A box will be asked to our panelists to provide verbal responses. And you can also continue to submit questions in the Q&A box. Again, this webinar today is focused on the 2023 consent order. So if you have questions outside of that scope, we may not be able to get to them tonight, but we will work to get your answer soon. Now I'll pass it off to Bee Wong to lead the question and answer.
Good evening, everyone. I will read the questions that are in the chat, and we can, and Amy Miller or someone from our group will answer them. The first question is, someone has to explain how the DOH and Navy concocted the quote unquote reuse plan. The result of the survey presented at the FTAC was debatable as to the analysis. If the question was already made, as it appears, then why spend money on a contractor to just prove the DOH and Navy's preference? Please provide a clear answer.
Thank you for the question concerning the survey process, which was something that the Navy decided to pursue. And I'm going to turn the question over to Grant Scavello, who has been working as our Red Hill coordinator. Grant.
Yes, hi, and good evening. I was at the FTAC meeting and wanted to let participants on this webinar know that the results that were presented there were preliminary and no decisions have been made at this time regarding permanent defueling closure in the process.
So under the consent order, we are going to be looking and working with the Hawaii Department of Health to determine whether or not the closure plan meets the requirements of Hawaii's regulations for closing tanks. One thing that is unique about this circumstance is the regulations were typically made for much smaller tanks. So these are very unique circumstances, and how to close the tank is something that we will be putting a close eye on as we receive the plans. We have already received a few plans scoping out some of the process, but we will continue to receive further supplements, and then ultimately we'll need to approve the closure plan. Thank you.
Okay, the next question is, why can't EPA provide more input regarding the EALs for full TPH range in drinking water nationwide instead of relying on the states to regulate?
Thank you for the question concerning drinking water analysis. I'm going to turn to our expert drinking water manager, Corrine.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes.
So total petroleum hydrocarbon as a group is not regulated as a group of contaminants in the drinking water in the Safe Drinking Water Act. TPH in general provides, as many that have been involved with TPH, kind of a gross screening of large numbers of hydrocarbons. The agency under the Safe Drinking Water Act really focuses on speciating those chemicals that are where we have health information and are expected to be found in drinking water at levels of concern. It is likely that the agency will never regulate or will not put energy into developing kind of a grouping regulatory framework around TPH in drinking water. TPH, however, is a constituent that is measured in groundwater quality, separate and apart from a supply and source of drinking water, where there are risks posed by the presence of potential contributing chemicals that would contribute to that. So it really relies, and we defer to states who are best suited to look at their local situation. And certainly, though, we are always there to counsel, but it's usually the local entities that really focus around TPH in groundwater, separate and apart from its source, its primary source of drinking water. And
The next question is, Who will set the agenda for community meetings? Let's keep it community regardless of military presence.
Thank you for the question about the Community Representation Initiative, and I'm going to hand it over to Dominique.
Yeah, so the agendas for the Community Representation Initiative meetings will be set jointly by the Community Representation Initiative, EPA, Navy, and JTF. Navy and JTF will be providing briefings on project progress, but members of that group can request presentations on specific aspects of the project. And so they can help set the agenda by requesting more information about specifics on drinking water, defueling, and closure. So it will be a joint process in setting that agenda.
Okay, the next question is, if the EPA has no full chemical spill list from the Navy, wait, I lost the question. How can we say the water is safe? Also, please no reuse. The survey was a mess. You couldn't say what you prefer for closure.
So as I mentioned during the presentation, several things I want to mention. One is during the presentation, I mentioned that we have a second consent order concerning remediation. And as part of that order, we are investigating the extent and magnitude of contamination, and that process is underway. And we will be making determinations of how to remediate, and we will continue to focus on this until the water is at a point that it has been remediated, but that is going to take a long time. Also, I want to mention that we also, as spills do happen, we do conduct investigations and look into those spills. For instance, when we learned about the 2022 November spill of PFAS or AFF spill, we immediately began an investigation and looked into it and began to look into other types of AFF spills at Red Hill. That investigation is still ongoing, but we plan to have an investigation report by the end of summer. Thank you.
I'm not sure if this is a question or more of a comment. DOH requested to Navy to pursue non-use reuse.
Okay, so Donald is indicating that the concept for the survey came from DOH, and perhaps maybe we can provide a more extensive response afterwards to the question about the survey and get people more information about how the survey was created. Thank you.
The next comment question is, hi all, thank you very much for this webinar. One of the community demands was that the EPA not agree to anything that could hamstring or even override the DOH's EO to defuel and close the Red Hill facility. Required by section 2.1 of the consent order are dual submissions of the Navy's progress to both the EPA and the DOH at the same time. The EPA is less clear on its procedure to quote unquote coordinate with the DOH to implement drinking water protection requirements beyond minimizing duplication of work to avoid conflicting requirements. Please expand on how the EPA will coordinate with DOH to implement drinking water protection requirements. Please be specific. What exactly are your steps?
Thank you so much for this question concerning drinking water. first, before I hand it off to Kareen, who's been working specifically on the drinking water requirements, I just want to state that the Department of Health's emergency order does not have drinking water requirements within it. The focus of the Department of Health's order is on the defueling and closure of the Red Hill facility. In fact, the Department of Health did want us to include drinking water requirements because their order did not have those requirements. But I'm going to ask Kareen just to talk a little bit about our coordination with the Department of Health on drinking water. Kareen?
Hi there. So we have had a long regulatory relationship with the Department of Health. Regulatory, when I mean, they have in some form or fashion, they have been delegated to administer the federal drinking water program, and through that, they oversee the water systems in the state of Hawaii. Through that mechanism, they are an extension of us, although we do, if needed, can overstep and can come in to address issues. But the Hawaii Department of Health is the primacy, what we call the primacy or the lead primary enforcement agency for implementing Safe Drinking Water Act requirements, and does that through their authorities to ensure that they meet both state and federal requirements. And we work in partnership, providing technical assistance as needed, and to be there to support in terms of both finances and resources to ensure drinking water safety in partnership with the states.
Okay, the next question is, the question's only about repurposing. Will the EPA be involved as the discussions are going on between the DOH and Navy, museums, shelters, and such?
The EPA will be involved in determining approval of the closure plan. And so if the closure plan includes repurposing, we will have an opportunity to review that and determine whether or not it meets the criteria set forth in the consent order.
Okay, the next question is, if and when things go awry or off schedule from this order, how does enforcement work? More meetings or fines?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? A dog was barking and I couldn't hear.
Okay. If and when things go awry or off schedule from this order, how does enforcement work? More meetings or fines?
So the order sets forward a process. Several things are in this order, which one will help to ensure the Navy is on track. We have set up senior level meetings to have check-ins to hopefully avoid any non-compliances. But if there are non-compliances, we have the capability of requiring compliance and also demanding stipulated penalties. I'm going to turn to my colleague, Dusty Miner, to add to this response.
Hello, I'm Dustin Miner, and I'm one of the attorneys that helped to negotiate the consent order. And I think, as Amy said, really the intent of the consent order is to do the defueling and closure and get things cleaned up. And so it is forward looking, but it has numerous provisions that are designed to keep them on track. So if they aren't performing as required, we can assess stipulated penalties, and those continue to occur on a weekly basis until the violation is addressed. So it's a incentive to return to compliance. There's also a dispute resolution process, which hopefully will avoid this, because one thing that is unique about this order is these senior level meetings at both Amy's level on a monthly basis and the regional administrator and the corresponding level on a quarterly basis. And the goal of those is to avoid ending up in a situation where we have a problem. But if we did, we could seek stipulated penalties and try to get them back on track. So that's basically the process.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, does the EPA have regulate? Oh, why? The next question is, sorry, why can't EPA provide more input? Oh no, I read that. Sorry, I'm having trouble with where I am in the questions. I think okay, here it is. It is deeply disappointing that no meaningful penalties called for by the Sierra Club have been revised. The Navy has the ability to request extensions from the EPA and essentially adjust deadlines based on unforeseen, uncontrollable circumstances. The unforeseen, uncontrollable circumstances are subject to the EPA's review. Since the provision has the capacity for abuse by the Navy, language in the consent order should include retroactive penalties to be incurred in the case of an unwarranted delay that was foreseeable or controllable. It may also be suggested that other agencies, such as the DOH, should also review the legitimacy of the delay due to the unforeseen circumstances. Will the EPA consider including retroactive penalties to be incurred in the case of an unwarranted delay that was foreseeable or controllable?
Thank you for the question. So I want to answer this in two parts. This is an order that is an imminent substantial endangerment order. The tasks ahead do pose a risk, and we want to ensure that we have clear oversight. Defueling is not something that EPA usually has oversight over. And so it is important to us to have a mechanism in place to oversee this work. If during the implementation of this order, they do not comply with the terms of the order, we will seek stipulated penalties. For the part of this question, I think, asks about past non-compliances. Again, this is an order that deals with future actions that are going to happen. Whether or not there will be penalties for past actions is still pending. EPA focuses on bringing facilities first into compliance before we determine what appropriate other action needs to be taken, whether it's penalty or some other measure. Thank you for your question.
Okay. The next question is, with the current state of, I think this is Hawaii EAL levels at 266 ppb, which were also raised after the November spill, has the EPA considered urging the state of Hawaii to lower their exuberant levels back beyond 50 ppb, which was still too high?
Thank you for your question concerning the environmental action levels. I'm going to turn this question over to Corrine.
Hi there, Jamie. There was a similar question posed, which I answered actually in the chat, which was very much related to Hawaii EALs. And the states establishing EALs, it's probably best, this question's best posed to the Hawaii Department of Health, who are certainly more situationally aware when they develop their EALs that are based on site-specific criteria. I know that there are ongoing discussions between our toxicologists around Hawaii EALs and its formulations and development. And so there is more ongoing discussions that will be had. And it's probably too premature just to really respond currently on kind of where that might go. But I will say that it is on the table for discussions between the two agencies as we continue to move jointly on determining the appropriate EAL levels. Dominique, is there anything that you might want to add on this? I noticed that you might have comments that you might want to make. No? Okay.
No, Kareem, thank you.
I'm so sorry. I saw a little note that okay, thanks.
Okay, the next question is, I don't see repurposing in the 2023 consent decree. Where is that located?
Thanks for the question about the closure and repurposing. So as I had mentioned during the presentation, we are requesting a closure plan that complies with Hawaii Department of Health's regulations for closing tanks. And there are three different ways in which a tank can be closed under those regulations. One is removing the tank, the other is filling it with material, and the third one is closure in place. Those are the three. Repurposing of the tank, I will wait until we see what the closure plan actually looks like. I would assume that would perhaps maybe fall under the last possibility of just closing in place, but it's too early for me to speculate on how exactly that would fit in. I invite any other panelist to add commentary here.
Hi, this is Dustin Miner again, and just to sort of add to what Amy said. So the three methods are, remove, fill, or another approved method. And we're citing Hawaii's regs. So it actually requires both EPA and DOH approval. And so there is no sort of roadmap for another approved method for tanks of this, size. Usually you're dealing with like gas stations or smaller things. And so we did not specify anything in the consent order itself or the statement of work about reuse. So if you look for that, you won't find it. And we do have to approve the method of closure. So as has been discussed earlier, EPA has to approve the permanent closure of the tank. So the Hawaii regulations that are being cited to require closure require permanent closure. And so the way it works is that the Navy presents a proposal to us for approval. And so what they're doing with the survey is going out and seeking input prior to submitting, what their proposal is. So we don't actually know what they're going to propose yet, but when they do, we will have to evaluate that and coordinate with DOH. And if we don't approve it, that they can't do it.
Okay, thanks, Dusty. The next question is, will people who are no longer on Oahu have any input on CRI members? Many affected families are no longer on the island.
Thank you for the question, Meredith. I'm going to turn to Dominique to help answer this question.
Yeah. We certainly want to include people who are impacted by Red Hill releases that are no longer on island. How they should be included, whether that's an online survey, online nomination, and voting process. Those will be one of the questions that we'll receive input on during that scoping meeting. So if you have ideas on who should be included and how, please attend that scoping meeting on July 27th. We want to hear from you.
Okay, the next question is, what effect will the anticipated appointment of Admiral Samuel Papero, I hope I said his name right, the current commander of the Navy's Pacific Fleet, to be the next chief of Navy operations have on the ability of the Navy to comply with the Red Hill defueling? For example, will there be delays due to the change in leadership? Will other leaders tasked with Red Hill defueling also be reassigned due to Papero's appointment?
Thank you for the question. This is probably a question that's better to be answered by the Navy, and perhaps we can work with the Navy and the Joint Task Force for an appropriate answer.
The next question is, does EPA support the updated closure plan, supplement 2, regarding removal of all 3 pipelines?
So the question is about the closure plan, which we recently did receive. I believe we received it at the end of May. We are currently evaluating that plan, and at this point, I can't provide any comments until we've completed our review. But thank you.
And the next is a comment. The tank closure plan has requested closure in place. This is an effort to look at, there is an effort to look at beneficial non-fuel reuse as requested by DOH, as stated in the FTAC and the 2023 NDAA. All of this will be consolidated into a brief to Congress in February 2024. I guess that's a comment more than a question. Okay, one of the next is one of the community demands was that the EPA prohibit the use of forever chemicals in the Red Hill facility's fire suppression system. This demand was not met. Why is the consent order silent on forever chemicals in the Red Hill facility's fire suppression system?
Thank you, Rebecca, for your question. So first, with respects to PFAS and the firefighting foam, currently we do not regulate firefighting foam. What we do regulate is, is protecting drinking water. And when there is an imminent substantial endangerment, we can look at taking measures to protect drinking water. And so we are wanting to understand more about PFAS in the groundwater, and we are using 2 different mechanisms, 2 different enforcement tools to determine what is the scope of potential risk of PFAS in drinking water. And this is through our 2015 Administrative Order on Consent, as well as a federal facility agreement we have for the entire base. And I see that Dusty's come on, and perhaps he can add more to this answer. Thank you, Dusty.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that, I don't want to take credit for it as the agency, but currently, as proposed, JTF is not proposing to use AFFF as part of the firefighting system for Red Hill going forward during defueling. And so We are not the firefighting agency that approves the firefighting, methods. They've suggested in supplement 2 that is something that EPA and DOH will have to weigh in on, and that's not really our role. Fed Fire is involved as well, but that's not a final decision that has been made yet. But currently, they're projecting not to use AFFF for fire suppression system. The AFFF is still up there, but it's not currently connected to and operating, to respond to a fire at this moment. And so I think that's something we can involve the CRI in as we go forward, and as those decisions are made, there can be discussions with the Navy and DLA and JTF about that. That's all I wanted to add.
Okay, the next question, maybe it's more of a comment. How can you consider repurposing of the tanks when they're falling apart from the inside and the ground around, above and below the tank is contaminated? Surely anything else you put in there will be contaminated also.
So we have not received a final closure plan, and until we have that closure plan, we're not evaluating or considering anything. We have received certain supplements, but the ultimate closure plan will have to come through, and we will review it.
Okay. We got a comment. Thank you all for fairly answering the questions that you can. And then the question is, can you save and post these questions and answer?
Dominique, do you want to answer that question?
Yeah, so the question and answer portion of this webinar will be included in the recording that we post online. It should be posted within the next week or two. And then also we have an FAQ document on our Red Hill website where we'll be selecting questions and answers from this webinar and including that in our FAQ document.
Okay, and then the next question is, with all the required repairs getting completed, are the pipelines still delivering fuel to customers?
So if the question is about fuel and whether or not the Navy has fuel for its customers, based on my knowledge, and this is probably outside of the scope of this, but they have other resources available to receive fuel. And as Donald Pantheon responds in the comments, the pipelines have not been used for fueling.
Okay, thank you, everyone. That's all the questions that I have seen that I see in the chat, in the Q&A.
All right, if there are no other questions, we can continue with the webinar. If you have other questions that come up later on, please feel free to submit them to the redhill@epa.gov inbox, and we'll get a response to you. On this webpage or on this slide, there are several links where you can sign up for email lists, and there's also contact information of key staff that can provide more information, including my email. So if you have questions on the Community Representation Initiative or general public engagement questions, please feel free to send those in. Also, as we stated before, we will be posting recordings of this webinar on the EPA Red Hill webpage in English, Tagalog, Ilocano, Japanese, and Olelo Hawaii. The interpreted recordings will take a couple of weeks, but be on the lookout for those, and we'll send an email blast when they are ready. Again, if you know others that need other languages and interpretation, please reach out to the redhill@epa.gov webpage, and we'll provide that for you. Next slide. The next webinar event will be announced shortly. If there's a specific topic that you would like to be covered in an upcoming webinar, please email the Red Hill inbox with your suggestion. Again, all webinar series information can be found at the link at the bottom of the screen. There you'll find webinar announcements and recordings of past events. Next slide. Thank you all for joining today, and I hope you have a great rest of your evening.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for all of your questions and asking important questions about protecting human health and the environment. So thank you.